We're all here, are we?
Yes, yes.
Good. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's a delight to be seeing you all, albeit via Zoom, but it's a wonderful way to connect. And we've done quite a number of these facilitated interviews, and they can be terrific. And today, I'm delighted to have Gayle Wakeling with us today. As you know, Gayle is a long-term active member with the Friends. She's a long-term active member of the Australian Ladies Variety Association since 2003. She's been very active there. She started dancing professionally in 1968, taught dancing from 1976, and specialises in treating people with disabilities and spinal dysfunction through Pilates, massage, and vibration training. She has over 30 years' experience in the fitness and health industry, and in that time has been able to provide rehabilitation and core strengthening work to literally thousands of clients. So Gayle is a great expert in this area of personal health, the body, the muscular system, the joint system, and it's a delight to be able to welcome her today. The format of this afternoon will take the form of, I will interview Gayle, and at the end of about half an hour or so, we will open up for questions. So feel free to start gathering your questions as you go. May I suggest that just for housekeeping, I know we're a very well-behaved lot, but it's considered good practice to have your speaker on mute if you are not talking. It just allows no background noise to come through. And just put your hand up if you would like to speak, but if you would like to speak during the interview, please feel welcome to do so. Just pop your hand up and we can go from there. I should mention to you that I'm speaking to you from Taiwan, where after a great deal of red tape and paperwork and interviews and going to embassies, I was able to leave Australia and come to Taiwan to be with my other family here. So it's, again, one of the great joys of Zoom. The other evening I was on a session where we had 13 different countries on a Zoom call that was London time at 7 p.m. So it was great fun to be able to connect with people. And it is really terrific to be able to connect with you today because we just don't have the ability to do that. And this is a really safe and fun way. And I know it's only mid-afternoon, but I think some of you should at least be having a glass of wine while we're doing this.
Not me.
No, it's too early for me. It's too early even for me at 12 o'clock over here. But what I'd like to do first is, rather than just jump straight into Gayle's career, as we all know, we are connected by a great love of the ballet and a great love of theatre generally. And I want to take Gayle right back. And Gayle, I want to ask you, what were the really early influences on your life that gave you a love of dance? What were your first, I don't know, cultural experience or dance experience, and was there any particular influence in your life?
I can't say there was a lot of cultural experience from my family, but I had a girlfriend who lived 2 doors down when I was 8 years old, who was learning tap dancing from a new teacher that had just started up in the area, because we were a Department of Housing area and we were a brand new area, so there was no infrastructure at all. And she had started up a dance school, and I was besotted by all the movie musicals, Gene Kelly, Ann Miller. I just wanted to be able to dance like they did. It was just such a passion. So when I found out that Wendy was learning dance, I said to my mum, I want to learn how to tap. And
how old were you then?
I was 8. And it took a long time to convince my mother, and her sister actually convinced Mum that I should. And so that's how I started. But I did have a love of movie musicals. That's where it all came from. That's where the love of dance came from.
So the Ann Millers and the Sid Charises and
the
Ginger Rogers and all of that.
I was never tall enough or lithe enough. But it did not stop me from dancing and pursuing my love and my love of dance. I mean, if you ask me to perform down the middle of George Street at the moment, if I had or I haven't got my tap shoes on, but I've got my gold sparkly ones on, I'd certainly tap dance all the way down George Street for you to this day.
So your early influences were the great Broadway movie musicals, really, and dance musicals that got you going. Was there anyone else in your life in those early days that you sort of partnered with, or that you just went it alone and pursued that passion that you had?
Yeah, I loved the tap, and then I went on to Irish dancing. And then when my sister wanted to learn ballet, I started ballet, and I also went into Highland. So I pretty much covered every genre. And I just loved the exams, which sounds crazy, but I am an exam freak in that respect. I loved my exams. I loved all the competition. I loved performing in the Christmas concerts. I really didn't need anybody. I really didn't need anybody else.
You're a force of nature on your own. Trailblazing a path of dancing, and obviously that gave you a great love of, I suppose, a great desire to understand how the body works. And Gayle, would I be correct in saying doing those different genres of dancing has different requirements of the body and different asks of the body? What would you say about what do you think you learned from those early days of dancing all those different genres?
I really think that you should not just focus on one thing if you want a long, healthy life and still being able to walk around and do everything that you want to do. Tap and Irish dancing was very parallel, and ballet and Highland was very out. So you had to learn how to use your body in a different way for each one. And I think that gave me a better balance of my whole body. I didn't have any issues because I was too turned out in the hips. I didn't have any issues because I couldn't turn out in the hips. Because I had to do all of that, I think it gave me a better grounding as I was growing up, in that all my muscles and ligaments and joints were used equally by the four genres I was learning.
And Gayle, from that love and active dancing across those genres, what was it then that led you into your vocation now of fitness and health and the body? What was the transition into that vocation, which obviously is a vocation for you?
Oh, yes. Look, people ask me if I'd had a 5 or 10 year plan. I don't plan for anything. I take whatever is offered to me and run with it. And one day I was playing squash at the time, and there was a new exercise program had just come out to Australia, shows you how old I am, called aerobics. And everybody assumed that because I had a dance background that I knew everything about exercise, and they wanted me to run an aerobics class. And I said, well, I have to go and see what this is all about first. And I was horrified at what this person was making these people do, because it was contraindicated to everything that I knew as a dancer. So I then went and found out there was a course you could do to become a fitness aerobics instructor. And in those days, it was very fragmented, and it was a good course. Don't get me wrong. I'm still friends with the 3 guys that took the course. And
they
they're very
survived?
big.
Gayle, what can I just ask you, what was it about that first aerobic course that was so contrary to the things that you'd learned?
It was getting them to walk around the room on the outsides of their feet, and then walk on the insides of their feet, and then jump up and down in that position. All I could see was broken ankles, busted knees, and goodness knows what else. I was horrified, absolutely. And that was not what I was taught when I went to the course either. And as I was saying, those 3 gentlemen that taught me are still involved in the fitness industry through Fitness Australia, which is the biggest organisation. In fact, a lot of the dance studios are involved with Fitness Australia as well. So, I was taught by the best. And so it just progressed from there. I kept being asked to take aqua fitness classes, which I'd never heard of. And so then I found out there was a course for that. So slowly but surely, I got asked to work with the Brain Injury Institute. I got asked to work with people with intellectual disabilities. And so I just kept going on and doing whatever courses I could find.
Yes.
Until it finally sort of all fitted into one thing. So there was all the aerobics courses, all the aqua courses, all the disability courses I did, and then I did a massage course. And I eventually just put it all into one big bowl and mixed it up and found out where I had to go to get a degree in exercise physiology.
So Gayle, tell us then about your work today and what your therapy is and what your programs are in terms of the work that you now do and that therapeutic and rehabilitative work that you do.
I basically work with people who, they don't need physio anymore. It's chronic injuries. Some of them, my specialty is scoliosis. And I'm talking about not just people who have had rods put in their back, but people who have had no surgery at all because it can't be fixed. And they use hand controls to get to my classes in their cars because they can't use their legs. So I pretty much get more involved with people who feel that they can't do what they want to do, which just might be walking, it might be sitting at the theatre, even going shopping. I try and get them to get a basis of something and work on from there so that they can finally get to where they want to be. And I'm not talking about, climbing Mount Everest or running a marathon. I am just talking about basic needs around the house so that they don't have to go into a nursing home, or in the case of one of my 21-year-old clients, she doesn't have to go into a nursing home because there are no homes for teenagers or young people if they're no longer able to look after themselves. And bit of a tangent here, and NDIS is not all that good at helping people like that as well. So if I can get them to come along and just walk up my back steps, I've got 12 steps from the car park to my back door. They can come around the front and come in where there's no steps, but I encourage them to walk the stairs. And so just something as simple as that sometimes is just getting them up and down the stairs. We'd help if they need it, but hopefully not eventually.
Gayle, what's NDIS?
That's the disability insurance scheme that's supposed to be the best thing that since sliced bread that the government put together. So we won't get onto that subject.
All right, okay. You've got more specialised views. And that also reminds me of the extraordinary story that David Hallberg had when he had a dance injury which basically knocked him out. He had a couple of operations. He had therapy and operations in America that were not successful. And he came out to Australia and worked in Melbourne with the Australian Ballet's physiotherapy team. And of course, the rest is history. He went, not only did he go back to dance, but he went back to dance as probably one of the great male dancers in the world with some of the leading companies of the world, including performing with La Scala in Brisbane out here in Australia. And that's when we had David talk in Sydney about that extraordinary turnaround of his career. What would you say about that? I mean, it's so, in a way, unlikely that you would think a place like America with its advancements could not have rehabilitated him in any way, shape or form. Like, he was very, very much at the low end and could not dance, and then came out here and worked with the ballet, as I was saying, which also parallels the recent workshop you did with La Trobe with the Australian Ballet about joints and understanding how the whole sort of skeletal system works. So, Gayle, what would you say about that extraordinary story with David?
I'm not a doctor, but I never recommend surgery as a first port of call. I've seen too many people not get better. I'm just going to put it as easy as that. They just don't seem to progress to the point. I've got a client who's had 2 new knees and a new hip, and she could barely walk after the 3 operations because she was still in a lot of pain. And all I did with her was show her how to use her muscles. Our biggest barrier and our bestest tool that we have is our brain. You tell yourself in pain and you'll be in worse pain than you've ever seen in your life. But if you can focus on something else, and so I get her to focus on what muscles she's using when she's walking, when she's sitting on the toilet, how to get herself off the toilet, what muscles to use, how to get in and out of the car. And it's all about alignment of the body, and it takes a little while to actually reset your brain. And
Gayle,
so my first protocol is not surgery. It's always try and work out what your muscles and ligaments are doing, and then progress from there.
Gayle, that's fascinating, given what you were just saying about the use of the brain and possible retraining, would you say that to a large extent, quite a lot of your work is almost neurological, or rather similar to sort of Alexander technique or Feldenkrais, where a lot of it is about the messaging from the brain to the skeletal system and to the muscular system?
Yes. Well, a very, very easy example of that is if you go to a personal trainer, they'll tell you to do 10, 15, 20 squats. And most of my clients, if I said to them, okay, we're going to do a squat, they immediately freak out. I can't do a squat. There's no way. And so we talk about toilet position. When you go to the bathroom, what do? You squat to get on the toilet. And so I try and slow them down in that movement. I try and get them to think about where they've placed their feet. Hopefully they're not in a hurry. Where they've placed their feet. Whether their thighs and knees and toes are in line with each other. And then take yourself down slowly. And I often ask them to hold themselves just above the toilet, just for 2 seconds, then sit. And
so a lot of it's about retraining the mind, about how you think about the body.
Thinking about it differently. Don't think of it as a squat or a lunge or a deadlift or whatever, you've been told you should do. Think about it how you're using it in your real life. As I said, going to the toilet. I mean, even just walking to the fridge and getting a drink of water. I will sometimes ask my clients to walk to the fridge, walk back to where they were as if they've forgotten what they've gone for, then walk to the fridge again and then get the drink of water. And so they've put in those extra steps, but I just make them more conscious of how they're walking. If they're balanced between both feet, if they're using their hips, if they're stiff, because if they're stiff, you end up with lower back problems no matter where your injury comes from. So all that.
I don't know if I'm going to digress, but I don't know if any of our group today have seen Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin's wonderful series called Grace and Frankie, which is on Netflix. And really, Bruce, you've seen it, so you'll know this. It's a wonderful treatment about two very unlikely people being forced to come together in a friendship. And they're elderly. Lily Tomlin's 80, I think, and Jane Fonda, the queen of aerobics, is 83. And they're both very glamorous, particularly Jane Fonda. But there's a whole session on how Jane is having such trouble getting on and off the toilet. And they invent this apparatus to get them on and off the toilet. And I do recommend it to any of you. It's very funny, but it's also very poignant with a lot of the stories they deal with. And they talk about aging. So a lot of what and that makes it sound like a documentary. It's not. Bruce, it's a total comedy, really, isn't it?
Mm. Yeah, it's fantastic. It is truly the scene when something goes wrong with that toilet seat. I was nearly catatonic.
And I recommend it to all of you because in a way, a lot of what Gayle is talking about too is about using your body in a way, I suppose, that doesn't age you, that allows you mobility and allows you to get around and to be mobile. A friend of mine said the other day, you need the 3 M's as you get older: money, marbles, and mobility. And in a way, mobility and marbles are clearly the two most important. And really, that's what a lot of what Gayle's talking about is maintaining that dexterity of movement. And Gayle, would you say that informs a lot of your work with day-to-day people, as opposed to people who are high-end like ballet dancers or athletes?
Yeah. Well, what I got out of the La Trobe University piece was that Amber was saying that when she was injured and she couldn't really get her head around the fact that she had to use was one tiny little movement to get her mobility back again. And I think that's what a lot of people realize. It's not a big thing you have to do. Sometimes it might only be one tiny little movement repetitively until you can do that without, and I'm not going to say without pain, because discomfort's got a lot to do with it. If my clients say to me, I'll go, I can feel that. And I'll say, well, is it painful? I said, you haven't screamed at me, so it can't be too painful. And they'll say, no, I'm just aware of it. And sometimes that's a good thing, because it means that you're aware of what you're doing and you're doing it correctly, but your body's having to learn how to do it as well.
Yeah, it's becoming used to it. And what Gayle was saying there
has to be a pain message going to the brain, but it's not a sharp pain or I'm going to collapse on the ground type of pain. And I reckon if they don't yell at me, then I'm doing a good job.
And Gayle, you were saying, we were talking the other day, and the La Trobe University workshop and talks that they had in regard to the skeletal system and joints. Amber Scott, our principal dancer with the company, was part of that group. And Gayle, you were saying to me you were quite surprised in a way at how little she knew about how the body worked, despite being a high-end, classical dancer.
I think because you make such big movements. All right, you warm up by doing a plie or a tendu or something along those lines, but they move on from that very quickly and go through to the bigger movements, whether it's a grand jeté or whatever. And I think they've forgotten their training from when they were probably kids, from when you started off with a very small movement to make sure your body was working the right way before you went on to any grand movements. And she was, I was surprised that she said, I didn't even realize how my pelvic floor was connected to the rest of what I do. And I thought, wow, that really did surprise me, that somebody who had injured themselves and found out that part of it was the attachments to her pelvic floor that she needed to learn how to use in a small way instead of just making large gestures. And of course, she's still dancing now, so she has learned, but that really surprised me. And I find that that's sometimes the hardest thing to get through to my clients, especially if I have one gentleman who used to go skiing a lot, and he used to do the black runs, and he had a really bad smash. And so anyway, he came in, and I was trying to get him just to do a very small, like a skiing movement on the Pilates reformer, so that he was having help. And he goes, this isn't doing me any good. He says, I don't feel that I'm doing anything. And it took me a long time to get through to him that he was getting better by doing the small movements.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's the hardest thing to get through to people, that because you're injured, you can't go back to, well, definitely can't go back to what you were doing, but you've also got to take small steps to get there. It's not.
And Gayle, in regard to what you've just said too, often you'll see people in gyms literally sort of flogging themselves to death in that sort of erroneous belief that unless they're flogging themselves to death, they're not doing anything constructive. And that's really what you're saying too, isn't it? That sometimes the most discreet movements are actually doing you the most good. And Gayle, in regard to that, with the talk, with the La Trobe talk, out of that, the key topics seem to be posture, discomfort, which is what you just touched on, and to keep moving. What would you say about that whole workshop that La Trobe did in terms of its key messaging?
I thought it was brilliant, because I'm always going to workshops all the time, because if I don't keep updated, I can't belong to my associations or get my insurance to keep working. So I'm always updating, and I am always coming out of a workshop with at least one new thing or new technique. And when I was listening to this, I came away from it thinking, yes, I am so impressed with the fact that it's reinforcing everything I'm doing correctly. And I was pleased to see that, I'm not saying that the Australian Ballet hasn't kept up, but I was really pleased to see that everything I had learnt from different areas, whether it was from massage or fitness or whatever, is exactly the same message that the Australian Ballet was giving, which was that you need to keep moving, you need to make small movements if you're injured, and that discomfort is good for you until you get better again, and that it's extending their dance lives, which is what I got from it, which is brilliant. But that goes across to the general public as well, because it extends everybody's life. I mean, they're talking about us living until we're 90 or 100. So we don't want to be immobile old people in our 90s and our 100s. I don't know about you, but I want to be going out at 110, still at the ballet in my fancy shoes and my weird outfits.
That's right.
With my family going, what in the hell is she up to now?
That's right. Look, and I spoke to a friend of mine the other day, he's in his 80s, and he had an instructor coming over, and I said, why are you having an instructor coming to the house? He said, because they think I'm too old to go to the gym, not allowed in. No, truly, not allowed in past 80. And he said what you said. He said, I'm doing this because it gives me energy, and I don't want to be in a 3-wheel scooter running around doing the shopping. And he's very life, and you know, he's not an athlete or any of those things. So Gayle, in terms of, I suppose, what I'm hearing from you too is the really broad spectrum of education that you've had and different methodologies that you've connected with has clearly, you've distilled that, and that's clearly become your own way of dealing with people and of tutoring people. What would you say about that? Because most people have specializations, but you've had the great advantage of having had education and training from a great variety of disciplines. And what would you say the advantage is of having had that?
Oh, look, I've just found that I've been able to do talks like this with so many, whether it's intellectual disabilities, the groups there, because I found that one group I went to, they pretty much said, oh, look, they can't do anything because of other issues as well. And I said, well, if I put on some music, I'm sure they're going to jump up and down and do something, or they're going to wave their hands around, or even in a wheelchair, you know, they move. The music is what gets them going and what gives them that impetus to actually move. So with everything from dance to fitness and, you know, having kids of my own, although I don't think they want to be called kids now, means that I've always been able to relate to whatever group. When my sons played soccer, you know, I was giving information about the injuries on the side of the soccer team. When I was playing squash, I was helping people who had injuries when they're playing squash. So it just means that whoever walks through my door at my practice, I know I can help, providing they're willing to listen to me talk about small movements and retraining the brain. And they've got they all need tweaking.
And Gayle, I could imagine you, particularly given the focus that you have on the neurological, on the development of the brain and the instructions it's sending. As you would know, a lot of research is being done now on the rehabilitation of people who've had strokes, that they're saying it's the re-establishment of those neurological pathways that is really leading the field in stroke rehabilitation too, which that reminded me, you triggered that when you were talking about those messages from the brain. Clearly, the brain is a very powerful organ within the body, the most powerful. And often there are still things that we don't know about how the brain works. And if you can channel it, as you do in your work, that can be a major road to recovery or greater dexterity or any of those things, isn't it?
Yes, yes. I like to use myself as an example sometimes, because I have arthritis in every joint to my body. Thank you, Dad. I've got the same calcium. My father and I make too much calcium. And so I have arthritis in every joint in my body. And I used to run. I'm not a runner, I was a jogger. And I do the city to surf in, 50 minutes. And then the arthritis in my knee did a lot of damage. And so I still do the city to surf, but I walk it. There's no way I'm ever going to run again. But my doctor said to me, do you want to see your x-rays? And I went, no. And he goes, why? I said, because if I see how bad my knees are, I probably won't walk. If I don't know how bad they are, I can tell myself they're in good shape. And I still walk everywhere. I still do squats. I still do lunges. I've just started skipping again. After 2 years of damage to my knee, I've just started skipping with the skipping rope, and I can do a whole 60 seconds. Yay! I probably won't get past.
It's a great aerobic exercise, isn't it? Skipping, a great aerobic. Well, I have to
probably won't
say,
get past 60 seconds, but I mean, anybody who's seen me at the Opera House in my sky-high stilettos, you know, have seen me walking very slowly. That's not always because the stilettos are high. It's sometimes because the knees are going, no.
I thought it was because you'd had a couple of gins and you were being a bit careful about how you were proceeding.
No. Champagne maybe, but not gin, yes. But
I have to admit, Gayle, being in quite self-isolation over here, I have started skipping as well. And it's incredibly aerobic, isn't it? It's incredibly aerobic.
If you can't do anything else, get yourself a skipping rope or a hula hoop. One of the best exercises, again, is a hula hoop. And my biggest problem with some of my gentlemen is, you want me to what? And I have to try to get them to move their hips. I don't think they've ever moved their hips in their life. But and a skipping rope and a hula hoop, you don't need anything else. You really don't.
I think there's an entire act to the show in that. A hula hoop and a skipping rope, can't go wrong.
One of my cousins is a contortionist. In fact, she's the oldest contortionist in Australia, and she had a double hip replacement because this goes to movement as well. And she said to the physio, "What do I do now?" And he goes, "I have no idea." He says, "I've never given new hips to a contortionist before." So she's been working on her own stretching program, and she can't quite get a foot to a head yet, but she's working on it. And so that's what I'm saying. If you know your body well enough and you're willing to start off with small movements, you can do anything. Absolutely. She's my inspiration. She's my inspiration.
Gayle, I was going to ask you to, for all of us sort of lay people, for want of a better word, who are not ballet dancers, who are not athletes, what, from your experience, are the key messages that you would like to tell people about their dexterity and their mobility in life? What's your key advice in that area to the greater population?
In the language that I'm allowed to or not allowed to? I usually tell all my clients, those who have had conversations with me know where I'm going with this. I tell all my clients, our biggest problem is not getting off our fat asses and moving. I don't care whether it is just walking round the block to smell the roses or whatever, or just look at the trees. Whether it's just walking up to the backyard. I've got a bird feeder. I feed all the cockatoos and the lorikeets and the galahs. I've got a huge menagerie. And I'm quite happy just to walk up the backyard, put some feed in the bird feeder, and then walk down. I mean, that's not very far, but that's a lot for someone like my aunt a few years ago. She wouldn't have been able to walk up to the back. And so I'd encourage her when she was home to try and walk up and feed the birds or feed the water the plants or something like that. So when I'm feeling lazy, and yes, I get those moments too, especially in COVID, I've drunk a lot of wine and read a lot of books. I just try and say to myself, okay, you've got to go and get some lunch if this is a practice. I can walk 10 minutes up in one direction to buy myself a salad. I can walk 25 minutes in the other direction to get the salad. If I've got the time, I do the 25 minutes, even though I can get the same salad in both places, because it's all about pushing yourself just that little bit extra and just being aware of your body. And one thing I will say about one of my clients, she had a fall a couple of years back, and she worries about falling over. Now she's got problems with her neck because she keeps looking down at the ground. And so I'm now trying to teach her that you can have that little bit of focus at about 45 degrees and look at the ground to make sure there's nothing she's going to trip on without looking down at the ground. So we're trying to improve her posture while she's out walking. Yay, team. But I'm trying to improve that so that she can no longer have all these neck problems from just looking straight down the ground because she's worried about falling over. So
Yes.
sometimes it's just being aware about alignment of your body, where you're looking, and just go and do something. I mean, you know.
So it could be as simple as avoiding the escalator and taking the stairs.
Yes,
To, you know,
try to
keep
do it with
moving.
you today. I did it with you today. I do. I
Gayle,
take the stairs instead of the escalator. Yep.
Gayle, I wanted to ask you one question before we open it up to the floor for further questions generally, and that is, one great English philosopher once said, of all great educators and trainers, teachers, it doesn't matter what the subject is. In the end, the subject is always themselves. And I wanted to ask you, Gayle, what do you believe are your sort of personal qualities and attributes that you bring to your vocation, to your training, to your teaching that are uniquely Gayle Wakeling?
Oh, look, I tell everybody I'm an optimist and a realist. And I will pretty much tell you what I think, regardless of whether you want to hear it or not. Sometimes my mouth speaks before the brain engages, but yes, I do. I believe it's the fact that I don't like to give up on anybody, including myself or anybody in my family or my friends. I refuse to give up on anybody. And that can be a bit annoying at times because sometimes people don't want to hear what I'm saying, but that's okay. I've got a strong ego. I can take the criticism as well. And that's where champagne and wine comes in. No. But yes, I do believe it's the fact that I'm an optimist and a realist.
Yeah, and the candour and directness of your approach.
Yes, yes.
Gayle, that's been a fantastic illumination of both you as a person and you as a professional, with a very powerful vocation in life, which is about people's movement and their ability to function properly as human beings, which is an extraordinary thing. And we know, with our shared love of ballet, that ballet is one of the art forms and genres that sees that control of body movement at its highest and probably at its most artful as well, in a physical vocabulary that's not terribly natural to the human body as well, that's been made to be as parallel to human movement as possible and far more scientific than it has been over the past years. So I wanted to open it up to the floor now for questions of Gayle, because we've had more than our half hour of interview, which has been terrific. It's gone like 5 minutes, felt like to me. So I'd like to open up now to questions from the floor. I've got one, if no one has one at the moment. Gayle, who would you identify as one of your greatest patients, I suppose, or one of your great success stories with a person and a particular constraint or physical disability that they had that you were able to turn around?
Oh, that's, I mean, I'm hoping Mary's watching this as well. I won't give a last name. She was sent to me, God, almost 30 years ago, I think. Might have been 25 years ago. She was going to have rods put in her back because her scoliosis was so severe. But she needed to get some flexibility back in her back before she could have the rods put in. And she didn't believe it could be done. And I got that way that she'd turn up to me and I'd look at my appointment. Oh, I've got Mary today. And you can see the look on Mary's face because she'd go, oh, I've got to be here with Gayle. And so we had this really love-hate relationship. Well, I don't even know if there was love, this real hate-hate relationship, but I was determined she was going to get her flexibility back. And she did. And they put the rods in her back and she said to her doctor, oh, this is brilliant. What do I do now? And he says, well, you go back to Gayle. And she was horrified because she thought now that she'd had the rods put in her back, she didn't have to come back to me. And we are still together. She comes and sees me twice a week. We are still together to this day, 25 years later, because she needs, she has no pain and she has no problems. But when she does stop, like if I go away on holidays and she stops, she comes back in pain. So she knows it's maintenance for the rest of her life. And we are best friends now, but it's just hysterical because we talk back to that first day when we both didn't want to see either of us. So I believe she's my biggest success story, because I turned around her way of thinking about me as well. So yeah.
You've really got to watch Grace and Frankie, because that's you and Mary, probably. That's you and Mary. Bruce, wouldn't you say? No, you're on mute. Brucey, you're on mute.
No, it's still on mute.
It's up there.
Still
Gayle,
on mute.
you've got to watch it.
Okay, I'll get Mary. We'll watch it together.
You're the embodiment, darling.
Now, does anyone else have questions?
Gayle, it strikes me that we're all sitting here and we're, you know, staring into our laptops, and obviously we've all been doing so much Zooming, and my posture's diabolical. I guess if there's one thing, those little things, if there's one thing I can do every time I Zoom and every time I sit down at my laptop, what's that one thing from a posture perspective that I can alter or align or change that will really help all these hours?
Sit on your sit bones. If you put your hands under your butt, you can feel your bones.
Doing that. Yeah.
Sit on your sit bones, not back on your padding. The minute you sit back on your padding, I never say anybody's got a fat butt, by the way. The minute you sit back on your padding, you lose your posture and you go into that curvature part, which you don't want. So the first thing, the easiest thing to do is sit on your sit bones. And I will give you an exercise, because you've all stuck your hands under your butt now. Tighten your bottom muscles, tighten them, and release. Now, just tighten your right side only. Without tilting your head, Catherine. Now, release that one and just tighten your left. How many of you are uneven? Can or can't tighten one and not the other? Okay, that's your exercise for the rest of your life, to be able to separate your bum muscles. That's going to help with your posture, because it means that you're always sitting on one muscle, one side. So you're also going to be crooked that way. So sit on your sit bones and practice tightening and releasing single sides until you
That's amazing, Gayle. But I have to say, no wonder Mary hated you for 25 years.
Well, I've just realised that I've realised that I'm officially imbalanced.
you go, see? All right.
Diane, you had a question.
Well, I'd like to say, yes, sit bones. My yoga teacher, that's all she ever talked about was bloody sit bones.
Yes.
And now I realise, but I'd like to just, not a question, just say that I have done all my life, excuse my dog's barking, dancing. I've danced all sorts of dances just for my interest. But now I'm older, I find, and it's enough, I agree that you need to do different types of exercise. So I play golf, I swim, I walk. And another thing I now use, because I've got neuropathy in my peripheral neuropathy. Thank you, my father. And osteoporosis. Thank you, my mother. So when I walk the dog, but when I go for a big walk, like 2 hours, I use a walking pole or walking poles.
Oh, the Nordic
and
one?
I find that really gets, and I can, because I walk off to the right now with this peripheral neuropathy.
Yep.
But I find that you shouldn't do the one sort of exercise. I go to an exercise class. I live in a retirement village. We have exercise class. I do other exercises that I've been given by an exercise expert. I'm about to go to a exercise physio or a sports physiologist because I've got a bulging disc. Mm-hmm. And this person that I'm going to, a friend is going to, and she was given a little exercise and she thought, no, that's not going to work. And exactly what you've said, tiny exercises, and she said it's amazing. She said, I do them 10 minutes and it's working.
Yes.
But I'm really wonderful listening to you, because then I know I am doing the right thing. But thank you, Catherine, because when you mentioned that, I sat up straight. And keep your core in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Get on your sit bones. But thank you. It was really interesting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. And Gayle, I remember you saying too, because I'm in self-isolation, I've only got the laptop. I realised I was starting to hunch over and get into a lot of pain. And a friend of mine said, for God's sake, get someone to get you a separate keyboard and get the screen up. And it's just made a huge amount of difference, because I don't use the laptop a lot, because when I've got a PC, I'll use a PC because the screen is up and you're looking up. So I've got the screen now up on the big television, which is a bit weird, but instantly all that pain went, and my stretches were far more effective by not sort of that constant looking down onto the screen attached to the keyboard.
Yes.
Catherine, probably one of your problems.
COVID's been a big issue in that, especially in the younger, I'm talking about kids and teenagers, because they have a tendency to just slump on the lounge with their laptop on their lap and do everything from there, and they can be there for hours. And again, it's just a case of, you know, my father's favourite expression was, if you asked him to get you, if he was going to the kitchen and you said, "Can you get me a drink of water, Dad?" He'd go, "And what did your last slave die of?" And we knew that we had to go to the kitchen and get it ourselves. But but it's that sort of thing, you know. If the kids ask you to get something for them, don't tell them to get up and walk and go and get it themselves, because they need to get out of that hunched over posture from being in front of the laptop all the time.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions before we start to wind up today? Julie, did you have anything of Gayle? No? Well, Gayle, I have to say it's been a wonderful and very colourful session, but most importantly, as Diane touched on, a very informative session. And it certainly reconfirms everything that, you know, people are told and we read about. And it's just a wonderful thing to see you so dedicated to it, and also to see the extraordinary results that it produces, and your energy and commitment and passion about what you do is exactly the same as any ballet dancer or artist or great professional. And it's been really wonderful to hear from you today. And unless anyone else has anything to add today, I think we should be doing these things on a regular basis, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
And we'll have a series of hopefully as interesting people as Gayle today to
Gordon
speak.
wants to talk to me.
Thank you.
Who does?
Thank you.
Gordon wants to say.
No, I just want to say thank you very much. I'm doing a series of exercises for my knee, and it's based on the same philosophies you're doing.
Oh,
So
very
it's really
good.
nice to, sorry?
Very good.
Yeah, it's really nice to hear things being reinforced and that it actually works. I'm having great success with it, because I was facing surgery, I think,
No.
and I don't like surgery.
And that's what I got from the La Trobe University talk with the Australian Ballet. I got that you know, reinforcement the whole time that what I was doing was correct.
Yeah.
And that was fabulous. So if you get a chance to look at the La Trobe one, it is really interesting. Yeah.
Well, I've gone 11 years without surgery now with a
Yes.
bung knee, and I'm still classical balleting. So.
Right. Well, at the next outing, we're going to have to dance together, okay?
Oh yes. You're on, honey.
Now, everybody, this is your last chance to ask anything of Gayle while we're all together having this terrific time. Is there anyone else that would like to ask or comment on anything today? No, then if not, Gayle, I'm going to thank you very, very much, Catherine and Amy, for organising it. And as I said, we should do it more often. And I think we'll set this up regularly. And it's really fantastic to see you all and to be connected. I know you're all in Australia and I'm out of the country, and that's a wonderful thing for me to do too. I feel like $1 million after this. So thank you very much, everybody. And hopefully we'll see you all again very soon.
Thank you, Gayle.
Thank you, Gayle. Thank you.